Hi everyone, welcome to another Greenleaf Terrain video. This time I have another tutorial for you. I know these are few and far between, but I apologize for that. But I have lots of work to do, and every so often I have something that I do for myself or think that it's better for a tutorial. So this, as you can see, there is a section here. I'm going to show you how I've been sculpting these rocks using most of these rocks were made with just general Hydrocal, but I went to a store and picked this up. This is lightweight Hydrocal, and I didn't know how this was going to carve because I used normal Hydrocal before. So this whole section was pretty much a little bit more flat, laid back like this. So there was a little bit of a overhang here. I basically brought the overhang out a little bit, made a couple more bumps, made this whole lump at the bottom here and carved everything out. So it carves out just as nice as everything. I put a picture on my Facebook, and that was this section over here. I will zoom in and show you these rocks up much closer in a second. I just want to give you an idea of what I did to get to this point. So underneath is a 1/4 inch. You see here there is a 1/4 inch board, and then this is 1x2s. Yeah, 1x2 I guess pine that I've cut. The whole board is 1/4 inch shy on all the sides because I use 1/8 inch MDF. So there's 1/8 inch MDF that has been glued, and I use a pneumatic pin gun to pin it all into the side, so it gives a nice wooden sides. I sanded the corners to give the corners, you kind of see the corners are a little bit rounded, so the corners are rounded and nice, not sharp. I used my hot wire foam cutter table to basically cut out bottom 2-inch layer. You can see there's a 2-inch layer here. I stepped it up and just kind of cut it back. I think it's cut back around somewhere around this midsection. Again with a 1-inch layer here, and then a 1-inch layer again. I used the hot wire foam cutter and a little bit of a template to cut a channel out of here and out of this section. And then I used the hot wire foam table to make thin layers, pretty much as thin as all of these steps. And so I built all the steps separately. There is a spot to basically place a miniature every, it's about every 2.5–3 inches. Otherwise the steps are very more realistic looking. And they were just slid in, glued in, and then I all of these parts are done with Green Stuff World's rollers, some Super Sculpey that I used in the previous tutorial with the Tyranid pools, but this time I was just rolled out flat, and then I just give this, I guess it's like more of a cobblestone brick lay pattern. There's nothing special other than just this brick lay, and then I broke it up, and then the filler in there is wood filler. I'll be putting a little bit of wood filler up here. There is a hard line cut here because I'll be putting a ruined wall of sorts that'll be made with foam. That'll be all done after, and then I have some buildings from Foreground. There's a 3 set of buildings that they do for this board is built for Bushido, and it only plays on a 2x2 board. It's a very small skirmish game, so I wanted to do like a multi-level thing. There's some room to play here, there's room to play on the stairs, room to play up here. Some of the guys can fly and whatnot, and then there's a large play space around here. Both buildings can both fit over here. You can space them out. I have a few of these guys that I'm going to do for tree stands, and they'll be able to sit around. I might cut some smaller ones. I have some larger ones. I don't know what I'm going to be doing with the tree stands yet. But we will zoom the camera in now, and we'll check everything out a little bit closer, and then we'll get to actually doing the tutorial part. So before I actually get to showing you what we're going to do in this section, I just wanted to show you how these rocks, I like how the foam carves out for my desert rocks because it's a totally different look. But for these rock faces, and I just wanted like the stairs to look like they're built out of rock, so this is kind of more just a tiered area that I just kind of built up some more of the Hydrocal and then cast it all up. And then I'll have a little rock filler, and there'll be a whole bunch of other work if things don't look perfect to me or whatever. It's not always perfect, but I strive for some perfection. There's a little bit of area that needs to get fixed there. I always fill gaps and work somewhere else, because you got to work kind of basically a small section the way this Hydrocal cures really quickly. So sometimes I go back and fill in a gap and I forget to get it. So we'll get that guy. We'll put some more over here, and we'll get that guy when we do this guy. So I will come back and show you what we need to do this. So zoomed out a little bit again. As you can see, we need Hydrocal. This is again lightweight Hydrocal from Woodland Scenics. Lightweight Hydrocal, Woodland Scenics. You can see that. The best thing to use is actually there's these rubber. You can get them from, I couldn't find them at the art stores I went to today, but you can get these rubber bowls basically that after everything hardens you can form the bowl and it'll all break. But these are dollar store solo cups or beer cups or whatever you want to call them. So I just use one of these guys and a little bit of water. These guys are actually really good because they have ribs and it's kind of like a guideline. So if you're using this exact thing, what I've been doing for mine is filling up to where the ribs basically start at the bottom here, and then filling up with Hydrocal, as you'll see. I've been mixing with just a simple popsicle stick. I bought this guy when I first started doing this to help me do a little bit of the early forming. It's just a larger sculpting tool. And the main tools for the sculpting are trusty X-Acto knife and this guy. It's an old, it was basically kind of stuck together mostly at the top. So I took some scissors and I chopped down, because you need a really stiff bristled guy to get in there and do everything. As you see, it's got a bunch of the extra Hydrocal for me kind of getting into these cracks and cleaning them out and whatnot, as you'll see. So if you want to start, because some of these things need to actually thicken up a little bit, so I'm just going to get my water in there. And this, the other guy I had was a bag, and the bag was kind of a little bit more of a hassle to use. So it was filled up to that first rim, and then I've got a decent amount in there, just where I can start mixing. And then it's just a process of mixing it. And you don't want, if you were to use this to be pouring molds, you would want it to be more viscous, I guess. So more watery. But for my purposes, I want it to cure up before I can form it. And Hydrocal in general cures a little bit faster, as I've found, for this purpose. And it's way stronger than, say, plaster of Paris, which I did not want to use. So if you can see in my cup here, got good lighting. Yeah, you can see in my cup there. So it's way too watery. Yeah, you can see. So I'm basically going to do that exact same thing. I'm going to keep filling it up until it's around the top, that I can actually mix it without Hydrocal going everywhere. So there we go. It's starting to get thick enough now that you're actually picking it up. I just want to scrape all the walls, make sure I get all the dry stuff. And I'm gonna add a little bit more. Just a tad. And that'll be good. Yeah, right there. You want to get it for when it starts to, it gives you a little bit of resistance. It's not hard to do, but it starts to give you a little bit of resistance. And there, when it starts to, we can kind of pick it up and it leaves a peak in there. That's good. But what I've been doing is actually leaving this cup to set up for about a minute or so. So I'll come back in about a minute when I'm happy with how it's set up. So it's been actually a little bit less than a minute, and this is actually nice now. So I gotta move my light back a little bit here. I can actually get in there. Too much lighting. So I'm just gonna put, it's not thick enough yet, so I'm just gonna put an initial layer down. And I want this guy to actually not be as high as the two guys on the side here. I want this section to be a little bit lower. So we're not going to build up a lot at the top here. And like using that other trowel tool, I found applies more at this stage. But I find if I actually just use the smaller guy, I have a little bit more of control of where I'm putting my plaster in. And as well, it takes me a little bit longer, so the plaster is actually curing a little bit as I'm doing this, which I need, because this is not workable right now for the carving. This is just an initial layer, because we need a layer to carve it down. My camera cut out just as I was about this section, so I basically just finished up, overlapped a little bit. It's a little bit too watery right now, so it has slumped down to the bottom. So I'm gonna let it set up a little bit more, probably about 3, 4, or 5 minutes right now, and then we'll come back. So it's been about 3, 4 minutes, and I've just flipped this guy on his side for I can use my tool here and just form out some areas where I want to make my rocks. It's very, very rough at this point. When I basically taught myself to do this, I figured there's only one way that rocks form, and it's kind of naturally with wind and everything. So putting the first kind of layer of plaster down, I just kind of like let it naturally go, and then kind of just let it all kind of naturally happen how the plaster actually just kind of sits and forms by itself. So obviously I'm doing some pre-sculpting and everything, but as you'll see after, some things just totally change, and I'll cut entire chunks away and whatnot. So I got a little bit left in the cup here. I'm going to build up this bottom section a bit more here. That's a large guy, but as I'm laying this down, there's kind of like a natural gap there, so I'll just leave that guy. And I'm going to flip them back over in a second here, because I'm going to build up this other side of this piece. Because there's only a little bit of plaster left in here. You can put a bit more. Just layering up some of these flat sections so I don't carve down to the blue foam too much. And I'm going to put, no, it's not off camera, I don't think. Yeah, I'm just going to put a little bit over on this guy. So it is the very bottom of the cup here. I'll flip them over and finish placing this last bit. Everything is falling. Everything is falling. Oh. If I can get this last bit out. There. Cup's empty, and I'm just going to use my tool now. Let me move you back a little bit here. Yeah. And it is pretty much kind of like icing right now. So it's not the greatest to use my knife yet, but I can basically just kind of pick out where I want different rocks to be. I'll make a third guy there instead of 3. It's got to harden up a little bit more here, but this is a good stage to get some initial carving done. I'm basically just kind of looking at it, and there's little bumps here and there. Some of the spots where I put larger clumps are much easier to see. And we don't want too much rounded sections and whatnot. I can make shelves at this point. That guy steps in a little bit more. We do the same here. Just a little guy. So that's good enough right now that I can leave it and let it set up. I'm just going to clear some of the debris and clear my space off. Probably leave it for another 5 minutes, maybe longer. I'll time it again and come back, and then it'll be good time to start using my actual knife. But you can kind of see now how I get my kind of general idea. I just kind of went off what we had here, so I didn't, as I said, I didn't want the rocks to be higher than these 2 sections as I built these sections up. So we tiered down. As I was building it up, we had this large fissure here. There's another one here. So this creates a large rock. We picked out a little small rock here. There's another rock here, basically a rock there, rock here, rock there, and then a rock at the bottom. and then everything else is just kind of like get worked in. So basically large boulders that I pick out, and then there's different areas. Some of the other areas were carved out slightly different, but that's just because how I thought the rock form would go, plus how I explained earlier how just the plaster lays naturally, and then just work from there. So I'll be back after this cures a little bit more. Okay, we're back. It's been about a little bit 6-7 minutes. What I thought about is the time really doesn't matter. What you want from the start, as you saw, you don't want it to be too sloppy, so you need to wait a little bit before you can work it. And then when you can work it a little bit more, then I put these clumps down. But I can't move much with this guy anymore. What I basically did is I came over here about 4 minutes in, tested it. It was too soft still. But if I come in and scrape, that's perfect for carving right now. So I'm just going to come in and start working some of these areas. I don't want them to be too rounded and whatnot. So I'm going to move my light back a little bit before I can get in there and you can see what I'm doing. I started making some cuts here. So we'll divide this rock down and we'll follow it into that crevice. And then again, just following the rocks that I've already kind of established here. Just gonna get rid of some of this back here. Some of this flat area doesn't matter. This is where I'm gonna be putting stone and whatnot, and my stone wall. So I need to actually get rid of some of this back here. You can flatten out some of these tops. Again, you can still carve in, make shelf type deals. I have a line coming up from over there that kind of goes into this guy. So I'm gonna keep that going over there and carve this guy out. A little bit too deep there, but this is still workable enough that I can pick up some of this excess guy and smush him in there. Well, it's a bit late actually, so we'll have to come back. I know there's a few spots that I'm gonna have to come back and fix, and there's just this little guy over here. I think this guy's a bit off camera. It's the guy that we were fixing up before. Yeah, that one looks good. What were we working on? So this is the guy that I've been using. So I get to a point where there's too much excess around. So cleaning off also rounds off some of the areas. That's how I've been getting this look. Oh, my light. Make sure you guys can see everything. Yeah. So we can follow down. We need to work this guy a little bit. This is one of the connection points between the already done stuff and the new area. So sometimes I'm just not happy with how the actual rock looks, so change it up a little bit. This one's too bulbous there. Just gonna kind of work this fissure down here, or whatever they're called. I think they're called fissures, something like that. Where the water is kind of carved down this area here. There is a lump there. And as you see, if I just come at this guy at the side, it shears it off like how rocks would actually shale off like that. And then as it kind of looks very uniform right now, I can come in on some other angles, gouge out some areas, and then we've completely changed the look of that very flat rock right there. At the bottom here, I'm just kind of texturing up a little bit because there are not any large rocks. We can form this guy up a little bit here. So right now everything is looking pretty good. This guy hasn't been hit at all. There's a section in here that I'm not very happy with, and a couple things up here, but for these areas, other than this, these two I'm going to let harden up a little bit more before I attack and do what I want to do with those two flat sections. Here I'm just going to texture up a little bit, and then here I'm just going to do the same kind of thing I've been doing to these guys. Form out this rock a little bit more, make sure it doesn't have any too more flat areas, and then don't just kind of make it look like it's not a piece of plaster. Went a little bit too deep there, but that's okay. That all looks good there. And this guy needs to be kicked out of here. And coming down here, this kind of looks a little bit odd underneath this rock. I'm going to divide this guy up a little bit here. So I'm going to cut out not completely, just a little bit there. And this needs a little bit of texture down here. This is one of the connection areas. There's just some excess on the old part. We can just scrape that off. There's a bit of a smaller rock down in this section here, so I'll leave that guy. Just going to carve out the bottom of this channel here. So right now, again, there's a couple more sections that I want to mess around with. Up here, actually, for sure. But otherwise, it's just a matter of going around and cleaning up now. And then what I've been doing for all this excess is I just kind of bring it off this area and dump it on my floor and then just sweep it all up. So I will clean this all up and then we'll come back when this is hardened up again, maybe another 5 minutes, because what I have right now is actually pretty good. There's just a couple more things that I can do when it gets a little bit harder. So we'll be back in a minute, or 5-10 minutes, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But again, the time doesn't matter. What I'm looking for is, I don't want it to be too easy to carve. I want to be able to make little itty bitty changes to what I've done right now. So it needs to get a little bit harder for that, so I will come back when that's harder. So it's been about 10 minutes and it's hard enough to do. The thing I want to do is basically come in. I did already testing it out on this rock where I just kind of come in and gouge out a little bit areas and I don't know, change it up a little bit, because this face and there's a little bit of area that's definitely a slop from putting the initial guy on. Doesn't look very natural to me, so I'm just going to fix this guy up a little bit. And that's the guy. I don't want him to exist anymore. Make that into a little bit of a shelf. And let's get rid of some of that excess there. Just took the camera off the tripod, so here is the top. Down to the bottom where we worked. And if we pull out, it's a different color. It's always a little bit darker. It's got a cure. It takes about 24 hours to cure completely. I'm actually going to come back and add in a little bit more to that section because I wasn't very happy with how that was one of the earlier sections that I did. So other than that, come back, put a little bit of filler there, a A little bit of filler there. Because with this plaster, instead of just purely airbrushing it, I am going to use a little bit of airbrush for some tints and shading and whatnot. But otherwise, I can paint it with a wash technique. So this is the first of 3 tutorials that I'm going to do for this board. The first being how to sculpt rocks out of Hydrocal, and then how to paint them. And then we're going to do a tutorial on flocking using static grass and a static grass applicator and whatnot. So that'll be that. So that gives you a look at how I've been carving these rocks out of Hydrocal. If you are interested in picking up some custom terrain or any custom terrain, you can email me at greenleafterrain@gmail.com. I'll get back to you with a quote. Other than that, comments are always welcome. Please subscribe, and happy wargaming.